Hey, and welcome to iWizard. So I've been wanting to make this video for a while just because I feel like there's been something I've wanted to get off my chest when it comes to how I got into reading, how I came to love books, how it changed my life for the better, and what I think it can do for you too. So I hope you enjoy and stay tuned. All right, welcome back. Jordan here. So again, today's video is going to be about how I got into reading, how I fell in love with books, how reading became a kind of lifestyle for me, a way of being, and how that's pretty much enhanced every aspect of my life, and how I think it can do that for you too. All right, so I want to first back up and tell you guys how I came up with the idea for this video. The idea actually hit me when I was on Twitter, which is called X now, and someone quote tweeted an Andrew Tate tweet. So I'm not going to get into the phenomenon of Andrew Tate in this video. To me, this isn't political at all. I'm just referring to a tweet that this guy sent out that I found to be incredibly naive and silly. Andrew Tate, by the way, is a former kickboxer and, I don't know, I guess you would call him a men's influencer. I'm really not sure how else to describe him. He's big on fancy cars and just, flaunting how rich he is and giving men who live in their parents' basement advice on how to get out of their parents' basement and score with women and stuff like that. Again, I really don't feel like diving into the whole Andrew Tate phenomenon and what it means, whether he's smart or stupid, whether he's a legitimate men's lifestyle guru or just a cringy internet pimp. I honestly don't care to go there. Suffice it to say, this is a massively influential person with a large platform. And when he tweeted this, I'm about to show you this tweet, I legitimately thought to myself, this may be the tweet that I disagree with the most of any tweet I have ever seen in my entire life. This opinion of his, and he's free to have it. I'm a big fan of free speech here. This utterance that he's just put out there to the world. My point is, in my opinion, this is legitimately maybe the worst hot take I have ever seen, and I'm actually not sure that there is even a perspective that's ever been shared in public that I feel more diametrically opposed to than this one I'm about to share with you. So here it is. Tate says, quote, "Reading books is for losers who are afraid to learn from life. So they try and learn from the life others have lived. But you never really learn unless you lived it. You must feel it to believe it. Books are a total waste of time. Education for cowards." So he says books are for losers. And reading is not about living, but spying on other people who are living and then trying to learn from that. And to learn anything, you really just have to be there and live it, to use his words, which good luck learning about ancient Rome or Sparta or Athens or Mesopotamia or Egypt or any other ancient society or place that you can't get to. But okay, he then basically says, don't be so cerebral, quote, you must feel it to believe it. And so what he's saying is books are categorically really a waste of time. And also books are simply, and I'm quoting him, education for cowards. So not only in his mind are you a chump if you're spending your time reading, but also somehow you lack courage as well. When you sit down to read a book, you're walking through Central Park and you sit down on a park bench. You're a coward for reading that book, and you're a craven. I'm not sure how Andrew Tate learned to read when he was young, if not from books. But okay, so I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to set that aside and let you guys decide how you feel about that tweet. I'm not going to make this video about Andrew Tate's hot take, but I did want to at least tell you guys where the seed of this idea came from. This is really when I started thinking about why I so viscerally disagreed with this take. And I asked myself, okay, self, if you disagree with this guy's take, why do you disagree with it? And so I thought about it for a little bit. And then a couple of months back, I had the opportunity to chat with another booktuber, Joanna. I will link to her channel below. I was with her and Jared Henderson, who is a big-time philosophy booktuber, and we were doing her program that she calls Why Read? And the first question she asked us was exactly that. Why read? You know, why do we do what we do? Why do we spend so much time reading? What's so magical about it? And it's funny, in the moment, I talked about how reading changed the trajectory of my life, what it did for me, how I had no purpose, and how I felt like, you know, I was just kind of floating in life, and how reading really gave me a purpose. And the metaphor I used in the moment was the film Pleasantville. You guys have probably seen it. Tobey Maguire, Reese Witherspoon, William H. Macy. And in the movie, these people become stuck in this old TV sitcom, this black and white world. And I mean literally, there's no color. Everything's in black and white. Everything's just this 1950s Leave It to Beaver, repressed, white picket fence. Everything uncomfortable gets swept under the rug, suburban aesthetic. And then suddenly color starts to blossom in the world, and the characters and everything becomes more real. And that's kind of what it was like for me reading. I realized reading was bringing color to my life and making everything more vivid and interesting. So that's what I told Joanna and Jared. And I also told them that I agreed with George R.R. Martin's famous quote that a reader lives 1,000 lives, the man who doesn't read lives only one. And by that, I mean that reading isn't just this solitary thing that you do to escape or shut out the world, but that reading actually kind of brings the world to you and helps you experience it more vividly. So that was the conversation that I had on her channel. And if you haven't subscribed to her yet, give her channel a watch. It's really great stuff. But anyhow, that conversation really got me to thinking about this journey I've been on and what it means to me, how the journey started, and how it changed my life, and how I think it can change yours too. So I actually came to reading relatively late in life. I was definitely a late bloomer. Growing up, I was not unlike most boys of my demographic. I read Goosebumps by R.L. Stine, Hardy Boys, sports books, Chronicles of Narnia, books about weapons and guitars and cars. I was kind of a bad student in high school. I was in a rock band, and I was, at the time, maybe not doing the most savory things. And so when I graduated, I became, and people are always surprised to hear this, I became a mailman at the age of 18 and moved into my own apartment. I was, one of the first people that I even knew at the age of 18 who was living in his own apartment, independent from my parents. And I was working and playing local gigs for extra money. And it was the start of my third year delivering mail as a rural carrier that I fell in love with reading, and that changed my entire life. So this is relatively embarrassing, but the true start of it actually came when I watched the Sofia Coppola film Lost in Translation, which is still one of my favorite films, by the way. So here I think I was 20 at the time. I had just recently broken up with a long-term girlfriend, and I was kind of playing the field, but I was also lonely. But not just lonely, I was feeling like something else was missing from my life. I felt like I had something in me, some potential or possibility that was just untapped, lying dormant. But anyways, it was that summer I was working about 3 days a week as a postal carrier. I was also working part-time at this company, Aramark, driving a truck filled with candy and stocking candy machines. And so anyways, I realize I'm giving you my life story here, but the point I want to make is that I was starting to awaken intellectually and artistically, and just in my life in general. And for some reason, it was when I put on that film, Lost in Translation, it was the main character, Charlotte, that I just really connected with. I don't know why, but watching that movie just did something to me. In the film, Charlotte's obviously in Japan as she's staying at this giant hotel in Tokyo where she meets Bob Harris. That's Bill Murray's character. And of course, what's funny is that Bob Harris really is just Bill Murray. He's this famous but sort of fading American movie star who's having a midlife crisis. And he's in Tokyo to promote this Japanese whiskey, Suntory whiskey. And he's there and he's just becoming so dead inside and so world weary and jaded. And he's wondering if there's anything left to be passionate about in life. His 25-year marriage is kind of sad and perfunctory at this point. And it's at this massive hotel in Tokyo, the Park Hyatt Hotel, overlooking the city with a spa and pools and bathrobes and room service and all the amenities and doting customer service that you can imagine. It's there that he meets this American woman, Charlotte. That would be Scarlett Johansson's character, right? And the first time they see each other, they're standing in an elevator, and they're the only Americans in the elevator. And so anyways, they eventually end up spending more time together and falling for each other. And so this is a film about not fitting in and escaping ennui and finding solace and love and home with someone else who doesn't fit in. And all of this is against this very rich thematic backdrop of culture shock and alienation. And there's this kind of beautifully dreamy, jet-lagged, synthwave, shoegazer sort of feel to the whole film that really sort of resonates with me, and is also very relevant to the globalized but very also atomized and alienated technological world that we live in. But the real reason I'm telling you about this is that there was just something about Charlotte that I became obsessed with. This is a character who graduated with a degree in philosophy from Yale. And so I remembered at the time thinking, wow, what is philosophy? What really is philosophy? What does a philosopher do? What do they think about? What do they study? And I found myself wondering this because I just loved her whole vibe and the way she spoke and the way she looked at things and thought about things. And so I'm telling you guys a true story here, and I remember this very precisely. At the time, I had a girl over at my place, and this was about 4 months before I met NIKKI, so don't worry. NIKKI is my wife. And at the time, I was hanging out with this girl, and we watched this movie. It was at her suggestion. This was my first time seeing the movie, and I was floored. I just couldn't believe how much I connected with it. So the girl leaves, and I wake up the next morning, and I watch it again, all the way through. It was like I had to figure out why this movie was having the grip on me that it was having. And so I watched it again the next morning in my blanket, in my PJs, and I'm eating my life cereal and, milk dribbling down my face. And I'm watching it, and I just can't get Charlotte out of my head. But it was also this theme that I was stuck on, which is very prominent in the film, because these two people are displaced from their normal lives and they're in a foreign land. And it's just this question of who are you when you're taken out of your regular life? Who do you become? So the day after that, I go to work and I'm thinking about this character all day at the post office. And I get off of work and I just spontaneously decide to jump in my car and head out to the closest Barnes & Noble, which at the time, as I said, was very out of character for me because I wasn't a big reader. So I went and got a Starbucks drink and walked into this Barnes & Noble, and I just started exploring, and I remember feeling totally overwhelmed. just this lost boy in the midst of a world of literature. And I had Charlotte in my head, so I made my way over. My antenna was bringing me over to the philosophy section, and I remember being so fascinated by the books. And I picked up this little green book by Alan Watts called The Wisdom of Insecurity. Alan Watts was this 1960s beat philosopher who kind of introduced Buddhism and Zen and Taoism to the West. And I didn't know who any of these authors were, but I sat down in the coffee shop there and just started reading it. And then I bought it and I finished the book the next day. And I remember thinking, like, this is it. You know, I have to change my life now and I have to do something with this. I didn't really know at the time what it was, but I knew I needed to read more. And I was already beginning to understand what people meant when they talked about the life of the mind and the way that some people have these rich inner lives and these wells of wisdom. And it was rapidly becoming clear that the way that you do that, the way that you develop yourself in that way, the way that you become wise is through reading. So anyways, the months roll by, and at this point, I'm taking it slow. I've read maybe 2 more philosophy books. I'm living my life. I'm delivering mail. I'm stocking the candy machines, but I'm slowly reading these philosophy books. And remember, reading is a skill. Most people don't realize this. And being a good reader, it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you read, the more that you enjoy it, the more that the book that you're reading plays kind of like a movie in your head. And so I think the second book I read after the Alan Watts book was called The Undercover Philosopher. And it seemed like the perfect book for me. I went back to Barnes & Noble. I bought this book. It had this manly noir detective on the cover with the big city in the background. And it was all about how philosophy can totally change the way that you think. And of course, the author was talking all about Descartes, and I had no idea at the time who Descartes was. I'd never heard the term cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. I was just totally unfamiliar with this. I think the only way I'd heard of Descartes was geometry, like Cartesian coordinates. So naturally, the next book I bought was this anthology of Descartes' writings. And this is where I kind of got stuck. It was difficult. Descartes wasn't an easy read, especially for a newbie like me, and there was so much context I was lacking. And so at this point, it's the summer of 2008, and I'm still delivering the mail. And I had this moment one day as I'm driving my truck around delivering mail. And at the time, my postal route was like 5 hours long, 5 hours straight of just driving through some of the nicest neighborhoods, just massive houses in these idyllic suburbs in Connecticut. I'm in this little dinky postal truck with no air conditioning in the summer and a weak heater that barely worked in the winter, neither of which hardly matters anyways because you have to drive around with your giant window open anyways. So anyhow, I'm driving around day after day after day in this rickety old truck, and house after house is like 3-story gigantic gingerbread houses, white picket fences, manicured lawns, in-ground pools, yoga, wine moms, desperate housewives jazzercising away in the living room, Mercedes-Benzes and BMWs in the driveways. And I'm, stuffing their asset statements along with their LL Bean and Sundance catalogs. I'm stuffing those things into box after box, just the relentless number of packages and the perfectly pedigreed but vicious dogs that would tear your throat out if it weren't for their electric collars. Anyhow, I'm delivering one day, and this was the moment. I just stopped in between boxes, put my truck in park, and I remember this distinctly, thinking to myself, is this what you want to do forever? Do you really want to be getting into the dark, dank post office building at 6 a.m., sorting mail into metal slots in a cage for 4 hours, and then going out on your postal route and mindlessly putting the mail in the box after box for 5 hours every day, day after day? And remember, as a rural carrier, you're not allowed to listen to your headphones while you drive. There's no radio. I said to myself, do you really want to spend the rest of your life putting the mail in the box? Is that how you want your life to go? Is that what you want your contribution to be? Now, keep in mind, I am no elitist. Obviously, given my humble origins, I have nothing but respect for working people who do hard jobs that people with soft hands don't want to do. And for some of the people I worked with at the Postal Service and Aramark, doing that job was all they ever wanted. And for them, these jobs were actually very challenging and gratifying. But for me, that really wasn't the case. I was bored and I wasn't actually paying attention to what I was doing because my mind was on whatever I'd read or watched the night before. I was totally unfocused at work, and I knew I wanted more. And I thought maybe, just maybe, reading might have something to do with all of that. And so what I did was I decided to enroll in community college, and I moved back home with my parents so that I could afford it, which was kind of swallowing my pride. But then when I got there, I took philosophy and literature and economics classes and all the standard classes that you have to take, math, art, physics, but I kept reading. And the thing is that community colleges are actually great, totally underrated in the sense that you can do so much there. You're a big fish in a small pond if you have real goals. So I joined student government. I became secretary of student government, president of the philosophy club. I actually founded the philosophy club there. And eventually I transferred to a 4-year university, SUNY Binghamton in upstate New York, which they now call Binghamton University. I picked this place because, well, one, it's really the best public school in New York State, but also because it was cheap and it was kind of a renowned place to study English and philosophy. It's where the great literary critic and author John Gardner taught. It's where Camille Paglia did her undergraduate in English. And so I decided to major in philosophy, and I did an honors philosophy program there. And my honors thesis was a very long essay on the ancient Indian philosopher Vasubandhu and how his book, the Trisvabhava Nirdesha, I know that's a mouthful, how that was similar to the metaphysical system of the German idealist philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. I know a lot of that sounds boring to you guys, but for me, it was a lot more exciting than putting the mail in the box. And so here I was on my way, and I ended up going to graduate school for teaching. And along the way, I got married and all of that stuff. And so that's one really quick and dirty story of how reading changed the trajectory of my life. But okay, so I tell this story to give you a sense of my journey and where reading took me, right? And along the way, as I was doing all of this, as I was earning these degrees, I had been reading nonstop. The existentialists, Victorian literature, contemporary fiction, Japanese literature, Kant, Russian literature, mid-20th century American suburban fiction, right? Guys like John Updike and John Cheever and Richard Ford and Richard Yates, Tobias Wolff, rural fiction like Richard Russo and May Sarton and Howard Frank Mosier. I was reading the minimalists like Raymond Carver, the dirty realists, Charles Bukowski. For a while, I was really into the New Sincerity movement, right? Guys like David Foster Wallace. I went through a period where I was into the surrealists, right? Like the magical realists, Jose Saramago, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Iris Murdoch, those kind of authors. I got into the romantics in college and the transcendentalists and the modernists. And then when I started my teaching career, I got really into Shakespeare and ancient Greek epics and Greek tragedies. For a period there in college, I was into Civil War lit, American Revolutionary history, Westerns and Cormac McCarthy and Kafka and Samuel Beckett. I went through a phase where I was fixated on dinosaurs and dinosaur hunting of all things, which I'm still into. And all of this was before I even got into science fiction and fantasy, to which actually you might be surprised to hear I was a latecomer, right? So it was Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and Dune and Ursula Le Guin. I could definitely go on here. But anyways, this is kind of ancillary to the main point I want to make in this video. So what is the message here? The message is that reading changed my life. It quite literally changed where I was going in life. It opened up new avenues of awareness and new possibilities. And it actually took me from being one kind of person and put me on a new pathway to be an entirely different type of person. And it really paved that pathway. And so now that you know kind of where I started and where I came from, I thought I'd spend the rest of this video talking about what it did for me, how it changed my life for the better, and what it can do for you. So I've thought about this deeply, and I decided to make a list here. And this won't be overly structured, but I'm going to kind of just riff on each item. And these are in no particular order. So this list will range from things you'd think are small or trivial things, and then there'll be some that are deeper and more consequential. So here goes the list. This is just a list of some of the ways that reading can change your life for the better. Okay, so number one, and this is a piece of wisdom a wise man once gave me. He said, when your little room is filled with books, it isn't so little. So books are like doorways. They're like gateways or portals. As someone who grew up without a lot of money, with limited resources, this really is such an important point. Once I had become fascinated with books, once I realized what they could do for me, I realized I didn't need to have a lot of money to live a rich and meaningful life. And realizing that is so satisfying, because no matter what happens to you, you feel like things are going to be okay and you're going to live a meaningful life even despite your pinched resources. Obviously, having money is always nice, and you want to have enough of it to live comfortably, but not everyone is so fortunate. And it's amazing that you can just we are so lucky, you can just walk into your local library, spend an hour having a great time browsing some of the best books ever written in a comfy, temperature-controlled environment with helpful people surrounding you, and then walk out of there with a giant stack of books, and it's totally free. And your room may be small and you may feel like your life isn't very big or adventurous, but when you've got a big stack of books in your room, I mean, picture the stack. You've got Pet Sematary by Stephen King. You've got The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Heinlein. You've got maybe the Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. You've got Nabokov and Jane Austen in your stack. You've got Harry Potter and space opera novels and Agatha Christie mysteries. You've got the Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny. You've got Donna Tartt and Bret Easton Ellis and Chuck Palahniuk. And I'm just making this idiosyncratic list up off the top of my head, but I'm telling you, your room is no longer small once you've got that stack of books. It feels huge. And suddenly, with that stack in the corner of your room, you've got places to go. Adventure is calling your name. Suddenly, you're Bastian from Never-Ending Story. You're up in that attic, and your book is transporting you to places that feel more real than your real life ever felt. With all of its broken promises and its letdowns and its disenchanted, jaded lack of romance. And so you can live a simple life in your real life, and at the same time, when you're a reader, your life feels huge. And non-readers just won't understand that. You've got the stack of books that you brought home from the library, right? And you're eating ramen noodle soup and drinking tap water, and you feel like, oh shoot, you've got only a couple of days until your next paycheck, and yet you've got that stack of books. And you become suddenly the kids from the Chronicles of Narnia, right? Entering that wardrobe. You've got the world's only known form of time travel at your fingertips, and all you have to do is dig in and give yourself over to it. Okay, number 2, reading is not a waste of time. So when I was in college, in order to pay my rent, I worked at the local Walmart, right? I was working at the Walmart in Binghamton, New York, or it was Vestal, New York, actually. And I worked in the deli department, slicing meat for the world's most wonderful and well-adjusted people, Walmart customers. And one of the odd things I noticed even then, and this was about probably 2011, I was surprised to find that whenever I went on my 30-minute break and I entered the break room, the other employees on break were just scrolling on their phones, playing games on their phones, eating gross, fast food or whatever, watching TV. Nobody was reading. And I know that no one would be surprised by this today, because that seems to pretty much be everyone's default setting now, is scrolling through their phones whenever they have a minute. But at the time, I was kind of shocked and amazed. I was thinking, you guys are zombies, you know? It's like you could do anything with this time. You're being given a half an hour to take a break from the salt mines, essentially, and you guys are just, no one wants to escape with a good book or learn something interesting or even just, heck, flip through a magazine, read National Geographic or something like that. Why is everyone staring at their phones like zombies? And again, this is what everyone all the time does now, but even then, I remembered working with these people, and they were great people. Many of them were full-time Walmart employees, and I really got to know them because I worked 3 days a week, and they would tell me things like, yeah, man, I need to get out of here. I need to leave this place. I need to level up, man. I need to find something better than Walmart. I can't take this job and the stupidity and the shit we have to deal with here. And then they'd go into the break room and play Candy Crush or whatever it was at the time, whatever game it was. And I recall one moment in particular. I remember walking up to this guy, Dave, on break. And Dave was an interesting guy because he had a daughter and he used to be in the army, but he got injured. And so he had injury payments from the military, and he was also working at Walmart, and totally respectable guy. And I remember walking up to his table in the break room and asking him, hey man, you want to play chess, right? Because, I was kind of bored, he was kind of bored, and I thought I'd take a break from reading, let's play chess. And I'll never forget what he said to me. It was something to the effect of, yeah, sure, but I just need to earn this token, or something to that effect. He was playing a video game. And then he just sat there for the next half an hour, slumped over, fiddling with this game, staring at his screen with bags under his eyes for the next half an hour. And I remember thinking, what is this guy getting out of this? When he's done playing this game, what does he get out of this? And I kind of get it, maybe he was just tired, and this is the one thing all day that gives him a little bit of release and pleasure and fun. So it's not like I was really judging him. I liked the guy. I thought, a video game like that takes all of your mental energy, and yet when you're done, you walk away with nothing after you've spent all your time doing it. And I know so many people now, people I love and respect, that sit slumped over in their lazy boy chair watching stupid reality shows and playing Candy Crush at the same time, committing themselves to neither thing completely. And that just seems like such weak sauce. And again, I kind of get it. People work hard. They have to deal with all this shit. So I'm not being an elitist here. I just kind of want to give them something better, something I think that they'll actually like better once they've given it, a real try. Because again, reading is something that the more you do it, the better you get at it and the easier and more fun it becomes. So why not read a book on your lunch break, right? It probably takes ultimately less mental energy than playing some insane video game with all these different levels. And I know psychologists say that video games can be good for your brain, and yet with reading, you actually come away learning new facts. You learn new things about your own culture, about other cultures, about history and other ways of living and other times and places and events. Reading expands your vocabulary. I swear to God, when you read a lot, you just automatically become more articulate and nuanced and thoughtful without even trying. It's not like studying. You don't have to practice. You don't have to try. Just read these stories and it will change your brain. It will rewire your brain and you will be different. You start using more evocative and precise vocabulary words. You're introduced to more ways of thinking and speaking and communicating. So you start to incorporate those into your lexicon and your linguistic repertoire. The world broadens and expands, and suddenly once you become a reader, you can converse with really anyone now because you've met them before in a book. You become more empathetic and psychologically penetrating and astute about human nature. Also, reading is meditative. You go on your 30-minute break, you get lost in a story, and then the rest of your shift flies by and you feel better because then, when you go back to work, you will spend the next 3 hours thinking about everything that you read and the characters and what's about to happen next. In other words, reading is almost never a waste of time. I don't know if I've ever met anyone who regrets ever spending time reading. I mean, unless they're not reading good books or choosing good books, or unless they're really let down by a book, reading is not a waste of time. Okay, number 3, reading lingers in the blood. Not literally, obviously, but you'll see what I mean in a sec. So this is kind of a continuation of the last item I was talking about. So I was telling you guys earlier about my conversation with Joanna and Pleasantville, and how I felt that reading wasn't this solitary, cloistered thing that you do and then you like never leave your house and you become a disheveled recluse who can't relate to anyone. And reading isn't even just escapism, though it can be that. That's a wonderful thing about reading. That's cool too. But mostly what I realized when I started reading is that the books I was reading, they were actually enhancing my world and my life. They were bringing color and life to the world outside of reading, my so-called real life. So reading enhances the way that you see other people, the extent to which you're able to empathize with them. It enhances your powers of cognition, as I said, and especially your powers of reflection and your ability to put your thoughts into words. And that's a really big one. So here's something interesting. So I've been a high school English and philosophy teacher now for a full decade, 10 years. And one of the comments that I hear most from students, like reliably, I hear this probably every single year, maybe 10 to 15 times a year, and I hear it over and over again. And the concern always goes something like this. We'll be discussing a book, maybe it's Macbeth or Hamlet or The Things They Carried or whatever it is, and I'll ask a question in discussion, and a student will raise their hand and say, "Oh, geez, Mr. Hill, I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it. Like, I know exactly the point I want to make, but I just can't seem to put it into words. Oh, man." Or students will be writing an essay and they'll say, I know what my point is. I just don't know how to get it out on the page. And I know this sounds harsh, but my answer is almost always the same. My answer is, well, I sympathize with your struggle, but typically when you can't put something into words, it's because you actually don't know what you want to say. You have a vague intuition or a flash impression that you feel a certain way maybe about the scene or character we're talking about, and that makes you think you have a totally figured out point that you want to make, and you're actually just at a loss for words. But that's actually really not the case. Often when you can't figure out how to say the thing that you want to say, it's because it's not formulated yet, because you need words to fully formulate the thought. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a hazy intuition. So I'm going to tell you something that is super powerful and deeply true, I think. When you read, this problem largely goes away. You become so comfortable and familiar with words that when you have an idea, you're able to flesh it out and develop it using words. And you're able to do so much more quickly than people who don't read. When you have a thought and you're a reader, you can say exactly what you're thinking. When you're debating someone, you're able to think of a response and put it in the most concise, effective sentence packets using the best words possible to convey emotion, information, and experience. There's almost no one as dangerous, guys, and I'm telling you this, there's almost no one as competent or as powerful as a truly literate person who can write well, speak well, and think well. And I'm telling you, like 75% of that is reading. The rest is IQ and logical reasoning skills and other factors, most of which is out of your control. But reading is something that is decidedly in your control. And boy, will reading really make you a killer out there. But also, it's not just about being effective. It's also about meaning and one's inner life. There's a great poem by William Wordsworth called Tintern Abbey, where the speaker talks about the way in which nature and having experiences in nature, it's not just some compartmentalized thing that you go and do and, nature gives you a brief respite from your frustrating job and sitting under fluorescent lights. No, Wordsworth says having experiences in nature, even when you've been gone from being in nature for a while, he says, quote, and this is from the poem Tintern Abbey, he says, "These beauteous forms through a long absence are not as a landscape to a blind man's eye, but that oft in lonely rooms amid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them in hours of weariness sensations sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration, feelings of unremembered pleasure, as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life. And he ends by saying that nature has given him a, quote, sublime gift, a blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, the heavy and weary weight of all the unintelligible world is lightened, and that the, quote, serene and blessed mood that nature instills in people, that nature reestablishes in people, allows for them to, quote, see into the life of things. So for Wordsworth, having experiences in nature changes you. It changes your brain chemistry. He uses the term, because obviously he's living in the 18th and 19th centuries, he uses the term lingers in the blood. But what he's really saying is that the time that you spend in nature, you take it with you everywhere you go. It's like a superpower. And when you're going through a stressful situation, you can call upon it and you can call it out and it heals you and it helps you get through it. And I feel the same way about literature, because that's what it did for me when I was younger and what it continues to do for me today. And there's actually this effect that's kind of related to all this conversation. It's a frequency illusion called the Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon. You probably heard of it. It's a cognitive bias where people who learn something new, it's like whether you learn a word or something or event, once you learn it, you begin to encounter it frequently, right? Everywhere you go, you're hearing that word that you just learned. And isn't that so odd? Well, the reason it's actually a cognitive bias is that the word that you learned actually has always been spoken in your presence. It's been right in front of you your entire life, and you just haven't noticed it because it meant nothing to you at the time. It went in one ear and out the other. But now that you know the word, when you hear it, suddenly it evokes something and you can picture something real in your head. And so you consciously recognize it and it becomes part of your world. This is how reading works. You learn these historical facts. You learn about, you read the biographies of historical figures. You learn these new words as you're reading. You learn about, emotions and ideas and all sorts of different things. And not only does this keep your mind sharp, but it enhances your actual lived experience, because when you go out in the world, no longer are things going in one ear and out the other. You're just more engaged. There's always something pinging in your mind because you're keeping your brain active and you're always learning new things, and that enlivens your daily experience. It's actually a beautiful thing when you learn a new word and you start to hear it everywhere, because then you can participate in that conversation. Number 4, reading creates community and meaning. One thing I'll say is that when I started reading, I was running with a group of friends that were wonderful people, but I noticed that the more I read, the more alienated I was becoming from them because they themselves weren't big readers. So I was finding that as the years went on, I had less and less to talk about with the people that I used to party with, the people that used to get me in trouble, the people that wonderful people that would show up at my gigs. They were hardworking kids and things like that. And we would play pickup basketball and we'd go to parties and we'd do all these things, but they weren't big readers. And I noticed that, yes, reading alienated me from some of my old friends, but I made so many new friends. And the new friends I was making read the same books that I read. And so reading can create community. I know this is true of BookTube too. The more time I spend on BookTube, the more friends that I meet. And it's lovely having conversations with people and having interactions with people that share something with you as important as, there's almost nothing as satisfying or as pleasurable as finding someone with a similar reading taste as you. Book clubs are one of the most satisfying things in a world of internet activity, superficiality, everyone staring at their phones, the sense in which person-to-person, intimate, meaningful conversations are declining, and that sort of thing. Being able to sit down and read a book and focus your mind and then come together with like-minded people in our world today, there's almost nothing so satisfying. There's a famous Cormac McCarthy quote. He says, "Having read even a few dozen books books in common is a force more binding than blood. So the idea is that when you have similar or shared reading tastes with someone, that's an instant friendship right there. And you're going to go to the mat for that person because you share so many of the same priors and experiences. When you meet someone and you guys have read all the same books, you instantly have a world of things to talk about. You instantly have a ton in common, and that overcomes any differences. So reading creates community and meaning. I know that the Discord communities that I belong to, I know the communities I build when I'm teaching in my classroom, I know the book clubs I've been a part of and the colleagues that I share that I challenge to read books, and they challenge me to read books. I was in a book club recently where we read Snow Crash, and I forced a bunch of people to read Snow Crash. And then one of the math teachers at my school had us read a science book, and then one of the other English teachers had me and the others read Coriolanus. That was a beautiful thing. So it creates community and meaning, and I think we need that really badly right now. I want to say just two more. I'm running out of time. I don't want this video to go too long, so I'm going to kind of rattle these off. Number 5, reading is a cure for loneliness. It's a cure for the fickle nature of human beings. It's a cure for the contingencies of life. It's a cure, as I said, for the unaffordability of travel. And I'll just leave all of that right there and let you think about it. And lastly, I'm going to end on this one, okay? Reading is also a rare form of entertainment, especially in this age that we're living in. Unlike movies and television, where you're sitting passive and everything's being spoon-fed to you, and you're sitting back on the couch, there's really no active participation in the narrative because it's not like you have to create the images in your head, right? When you watch Harry Potter, the movies, you already know what Hermione looks like, and Ron and Harry and Dumbledore. You don't have to imagine any of that. Reading is so much fun because you're given the bare outline and the structure, and you have to populate these characters in your head. And you'll notice that if you're a good reader, and the more you do it, your mind automatically does that. And it does that in a way that's amazingly satisfying. And heck, then go watch the movie and be disappointed. But reading requires your active participation, right? It's a form of virtual reality. I've never understood why we need virtual reality, why I need to put these goggles on and be shown all these images when I have a very active inner life. I have powers of imagination and reflection. And so reading, for me, really is a form of not only time travel, as I said before, and escapism, as I said before, but it's also a kind of virtual reality that is immensely satisfying, and it's good for your brain. And so I'm going to leave it there. I thank you for listening to this long story about my journey and my life and how I think reading can improve and shape your life. I won't circle back to the Andrew Tate quote. I think I have demonstrated through my story why I disagree with that quote and how satisfying and important reading has been to my life. Thank you so much for listening to it. Follow us, iWizard, on Goodreads, on Facebook, on Instagram, and Tip Your Starving Booktuber on Patreon. And without further ado, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for listening, and happy reading. Bye-bye.